It is Armistice Day. I'm with you until 1 o'clock, so only 20 minutes or so left to get in more of your stories. And thank you so much to those who've already been sharing them with us this morning of remembrance. Who were you thinking about during the 2 minutes of silence today at 11 o'clock? Who will you continue to think about and have in your thoughts throughout the weekend as we lead up to Remembrance Sunday? It is time on Armistice Day, of course, to pay tribute as well, not just remember, pay tribute to those who have been killed when serving in conflict. Well, just over an hour ago, people fell silent across the country with that 2 minute silence.
When you go home, tell them of us and say, for your tomorrow, we gave our today.
Prince Harry was at the National Memorial Arboretum in Staffordshire, where he read Rupert Brooke's poem, The Soldier.
If I should die, think only this of me, that there's some corner of a foreign field that is forever England. There shall be in that rich earth a richer dust concealed, a dust whom England bore, shaped, made aware, gave once her flowers to love, her ways to roam, a body of England's breathing English air, washed by the rivers, blessed by the sons of home. And think this heart, all evil shed away, a pulse in the eternal mind, no less, give somewhere back the thoughts by England given. Her sights and sounds, dreams happy as her day, and laughter learnt of friends, and gentleness in hearts at peace under an English heaven.
That's Prince Harry there, who read Rupert Brooke's poem, The Soldier. Do keep getting in touch with who you are remembering, 0500 909 693. In a moment, I'll talk to Ian Parsons, a London cab driver who takes veterans to memorial sites in convoys of 80 to 100 black cabs. Brilliant stuff. But first, I want to speak to Frank Ashleigh, who joins me now. He joined up on his 18th birthday and was a glider pilot in World War II. Frank, welcome to the programme.
Very nice to be here.
Who will you be remembering, if I may start with that?
I suppose in order of my priorities, first Lofty Cummins, the man I had seated beside me on the flight deck. Then I think I go to the men we carried in our gliders and all the other gliders, and finally all those who fought at the Battle of Arnhem.
So those are the people in your thought every year when you think of people gone by and in those 2 minutes of silence, and I'm sure you'll be remembering them again on Sunday, on Remembrance Sunday. Your story then, when did you, I said you joined up on your 18th birthday, but how did it begin for you?
I volunteered on my 18th birthday, and after serving a year doing nothing, I volunteered for the Glider Pilot Regiment, was successful in passing the RAF Is This Man Suitable to Be a Pilot, and then went on to the primary selection.
And take me through what happened after that in terms of what type of war you had.
I became operational at the beginning of July 1944 and was transferred, posted to the RAF field at Harwell. where I was paired with Lofty Cummins, and we formed a crew. Together we did everything. We ate together, we slept together, we chased the birds together. Whatever we needed to do, we did it together. And I get very upset when I think of him.
Tell me what happened then to him.
I don't know. I was sent out on a patrol. I didn't get back. I was taken prisoner, and I learned later that he was killed in action. And I always visit his grave when I go to Arnhem every year.
It must be very difficult, even now, to talk about these things. In terms of being captured, how can you describe that?
Sheer terror. There's no other word for it. Sheer terror. As it turned out, not justified. We'd been for 4 days without food. We'd been sniping. And the first thing we told them was that we had not eaten for 4 days, and within 10 minutes food was provided for us.
Really? And just remind me, where were you when you were captured?
This was in a church in Oosterbeek, a suburb of Arnhem itself. It was the headquarters of the airborne forces in Holland.
And how long were you captured for?
I was captured on the 22nd of September. I was released early in May by the Red Army.
In May 1945?
In May 1945.
And what was life like? I mean, you said you got food straight away, but were you living in a constant state of fear?
No, not of fear. A constant state of hunger, yes.
Right.
But not fear. The Germans had treated us very well. I think this is because of their inbred respect for anybody who'd given them a good fight, and they certainly had that with us.
In terms of remembrance, then, which is what we're doing and talking about today, what's your sort of system each year? What's your tradition?
I don't understand your question.
In terms of what do you do each year to remember? Do you meet up with certain people? Do you travel with certain people? How do you mark Armistice Day and Remembrance?
I first of all go to Westminster Abbey for the Field of Remembrance. I've done that every year. And then I go back to Arnhem. Actually, that's the wrong way around. I go to Arnhem first, and then the Field of Remembrance, and then finally I go on parade at the Cenotaph.
So that's what you'll be doing on Sunday?
That's what I shall be doing on Sunday.
And how does that feel? Does it stay the same each year, or do you think it's changed over the years?
It's exactly the same. It's the most emotional experience one can have.
Yes, I can only imagine. Well, let me bring in Ian Parsons for a moment. A London cab driver, as I say, who takes veterans to memorial sites in these convoys of 80 to 100 black cabs. It's a charity that does this work, Ian. How did you get involved?
Well, I was invited to join the committee about a couple of years ago from the secretary of the charity, who I know from another taxi charity. So that's how it all began. And I've been increasingly involved in various activities ever since.
And what's it like? Tell us about these trips.
They are fabulous, actually. They're a sight to see. If you can imagine, a convoy of 80 taxis with World War II veterans on board, police outriders. We did a trip last year to the Netherlands, and just as Frank's been talking about going to Arnhem, we were there. And people, and I'm not exaggerating, for mile after mile, people would stand outside their houses waving at us, and this was in the rain, and when we got to where we were going to meet at a certain museum, there would be a huge crowd waiting to meet the veterans and greet the veterans and thank the veterans, and it really was heartwarming stuff, and really I can't tell you how much I'm happy to be part of this.
I'm sure. Well, Frank, you've been on these trips.
Only one of the taxis.
You've only done one, and how was it?
The taxi was out of this world. There's no other word for it. The fantastic reception we had, not only from the cab drivers who were giving up their time and their income and their costs to take us to Arnhem, but from the general public, it was absolutely mind-boggling. There was no other word for it. It was the most fantastic experience one could possibly have.
Well, Ian, who does this as a London cab driver, I mean, that you couldn't wish for a better review, could you?
Well, it's nice. It's nice to hear that, and obviously everybody involved. And we, as I say, we have a committee of 17, but we must remember there's around about 80 taxi drivers out there who give up 4 or 5 days of their time in their vehicle. We're in fairly challenging times, as I'm sure you know, in the cab trade, but they're able to give their time and help us, because we couldn't do it without them. So, as I say, sometimes it's funny, isn't it? When you're not paid, it can still be the most rewarding of times, and that's exactly what I feel, certainly.
And you do it specifically. I know you were invited to come on board, and I know it's called the Taxi Charity for short. But why do you do it personally?
I suppose a little saying: those who can should. What I mean by that is, I've got a cab. I can spare a few days here and there, and by doing that, I can make a little bit of a difference. I know it's a sort of a cliche answer, perhaps, but that really is true. Some things. If you can do something, why not do it? And as I say, I'm very, very glad to be able to do that.
Well, some of the best conversations I've ever had are with people in your trade. We put the world to rights if I get into a cab.
We haven't quite sorted it out yet, though, but we're working on it.
But it's always a work in progress. I bet you've had some amazing conversations by taking veterans to memorial sites.
Well, yes, we've listened to Frank's story, extraordinary story, and yes, certainly others have told me equally extraordinary stories, which I can certainly tell you one quickly that comes to mind. It was a commando, a gentleman who was in the commandos, and they were taking Pegasus Bridge, or about to, and he told me of a shell that flew directly over his head. He sort of ducked, but there was this whooshing sound, and it landed a few yards behind him, where all his colleagues were, and there was this terrible thud, and this huge amount of steam came out of the ground. It was steam, and he turned around, assuming everybody had died, but what it was a dud. Fortunately, it was a dud, and it sunk into the sodden ground, and it was just the heat from the shell that produced all this steam, and all his colleagues sort of walked through, all his fellow commandos walked through this steam, and then they all went on to be part of the group that captured the bridge.
Amazing.
Utterly amazing. And to be able to be standing almost where it happened with him all these years later, and listen to the story firsthand. I mean, it's a privilege, a real privilege.
I bet. Well, Ian Parsons, Frank Ashleigh, I'll come back to you in just a moment. I have been asking throughout the programme for you to get in touch with your stories of remembrance, who you'll be remembering. Douglas is in Newcastle. Hello, Douglas.
Hello, Emma.
Who's in your thoughts?
My dad.
Go on, tell me about your dad.
My dad had me late in life. He was one of those who survived the First World War, but because of the nature of his injuries, his whole life was altered in an obviously detrimental way because of the severity of his injuries. And there must have been thousands of people like my dad who suffered badly because of their experiences, but didn't actually die. And I'm thinking of him and how he suffered.
What was his injury?
Well, he was hit by a shell, or a shell exploded near to him. He was in the trenches, and his left leg was blown over his right shoulder. Oh. He was repatriated, and they fixed him up, but he was severely disabled, and his life was altered accordingly.
I bet. Well, thank you for sharing the story of your dad, and who will be in your thoughts in terms of remembering this today and this weekend. Let me bring in Ian. Hello, Ian.
Hello there.
Who are you going to be thinking about?
I'm thinking, as I always do at this time, about my late grandfather, and particularly is in our thoughts because of a story he told me as a young boy. He was a stretcher bearer in the First World War, and it was a story about when he was sitting in the trenches in between waiting for the call for help, sitting with his friends either side of him in a long line, just resting. And suddenly there was a sound, he told me, of machine gun bullets. And he ducked. He looked to his right. His friend on his right-hand side had a bullet in his forehead, killed outright. His friend on his left had a bullet in his neck, killed outright. And it was from that, in the heat of sort of the battle and calls and so forth, he later went back to the exact position and he sat down in exactly the same place. It was a clay wall, he told me. And he said that the bullet holes were there to be seen. And he laid back and he saw that a bullet hole was either side of his neck. And it was that whole thing that in the courage and everything that we know in battle and we hear about and we respect, that there's an element of luck. And that element of luck has meant that obviously I'm alive today. My mother was born. My children, who are 27, 25, they know this story. They'll be thinking of my grandfather, their late great-grandfather at this time. And I also think that in those days, in any war, it's chaotic. It must be horrendous in the heat of battle. To know that he, from seeing what he saw, had to go then and recover and help other people and get on with it, lives with me. I just thought I'd share that with you. It's a story that I'm a retired teacher, and certainly in my time in education, I recounted this story to many students.
Ian, thank you so much for getting in touch with us today and sharing it with us. It's a real privilege to hear so many of your memories and stories today. Let me go back to Frank Ashleigh, who joined up on his 18th birthday and was a glider pilot in World War II and captured in Holland in 1944. Frank, another detail of this, which is quite remarkable to consider, is you're Jewish. And I wondered if that added to your fear when you were captured. Were you aware of what was going on with Hitler?
No, I can't say I was fully aware of what was going on. We'd heard rumours that we didn't know. But any man who's going to action, who isn't frightened, is either a liar or a fool. And I was neither. I knew there could be trouble, but happily I didn't meet any anti-Semitism at all while I was in German hands.
And when you found out, finally, what had been going on, I mean, the horror of the Holocaust, what was your reaction?
Horror is not quite the right word. I think the right word is disgust, that any human being can do this to another human being for no reason whatever.
Yes, I mean, there are very few words you can even use that are appropriate to cover the scale of that genocide. I just wanted to finish by asking you, I know you try to go to Arnhem every year because you say you feel it would be betraying them if you didn't. Just explain that to me.
If I don't go, as I unfortunately could not do this year because of ill health, I feel a deep sense of something is missing in my life.
And that's what's important to honour.
That is vital.
Frank Ashleigh, thank you so much for coming onto the programme today and sharing your experiences of war and now remembrance. It means an awful lot to all of us, and we should thank you as well for your service. So thank you very much. Frank Ashleigh there. And Ian Parsons, let me also say thank you to you, a London cab driver who takes veterans along with 80 to 100 other cab drivers to memorial sites in these big convoys to make sure that they can pay their respects and do their remembering. Thank you to all of you for all of your sort of stories, family memories, who will be in your thoughts on Remembrance Sunday and who's been in your thoughts today on Armistice Day. Have a wonderful weekend. Stay with us here on 5 Live.